accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Hey, Green Lantern fans, welcome to the podcast of OA, episode number 237. I'm co-host Myron Rumsey, and I'm joined by my friend on the other end, Mr. Phil Bova. Phil, we're in a brand new year. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Yeah, year started off pretty good. Everything's going great. Went back to work, unfortunately, on the 3rd. So that,
Right.
but it was fun. We had a great Christmas. Clark had a great time, and my oldest son came in. He stayed for during Christmas, and that was amazing, man. Just having him around, and it was the first time we got to go out and have a drink together, like ever, and
Nice.
it was cool. It was a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I relished every time he was here.
Great. That's awesome. Did you get any
Yeah.
Green Lantern or comic book goodies for the holidays?
I got that really cool. I think I sent you a picture of that really cool Donkey Kong shirt
Yeah.
from my wife. Yeah. But no comic book goodies. So I'm
I,
okay with that though. I got a really cool Lego thing from Clark and my wife. It's the succulents, the flowers.
oh, cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's pretty neat.
I got a brand new Green Lantern jersey,
That's
and
pretty sweet.
yeah, I'm loving it. And then I've been getting into a lot of older books. So my cousin and his family chipped in and got me a bunch of the EC comics
Oh man, those are
collected.
sweet.
So
Those are
I've
good on the
got,
shelf too.
yeah. I've got the first 3 volumes of Volta Horror, the first 2 of the Haunt of Fear, and 2 of the Tales of the Crypt. So I've got some light reading to do. But I've been getting into old horror comics, and it's like you can't do any better than these.
I mean, much can be said for people and their artwork in their homes, right? And and I always argue with my wife and like, because I went through grad school and I collected and I read a lot and I got a ton of books everywhere in this house. But like at the same time, like they look good as art, just kind
Yeah.
of being up as a gravitas.
Well, and these are really cool because they have the ads and stuff in them.
That's
Uh,
sweet.
so it's really neat, because finding the Golden Age books is hard. And I know they've done these in hardcover, but I missed out on those. They have in these in the soft covers. I can't wait to dig into them because I've been getting into a lot of the older horror books lately. So this just really tickles that itch. So I'm excited to get into those. But
Hey, while we're not on the topic of Green Lantern stuff, I do want to say I think I texted you earlier. I read Duke #1, the
yeah,
G.I. Joe book. Man, so they're crossing over. I don't want to give away spoilers, but I mean it started off hard and good, and I was like, man, this is really going to be cool what they're going to be doing with this. But they're cross-genning it with Transformers.
oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's
So
cool.
yeah,
That's very cool. Well, we don't really have any Green Lantern news, but you and I
no,
were talking off mic over the holidays, and we were thinking, well, let's start a new little segment. We've kind of done away with Know Your Core, but let's start talking about Green Lantern on the panel, and that's appearances of Green Lantern in books that are not Green Lantern. And there have been a few recently in the last month or so of note. Hal Jordan showed up in Green Arrow #7 just last week or this week, depending on when you're listening or watching this. And it was an interesting conversation between Hal and Ollie. Ollie was kind of going through this whole thing where he's surprised the Justice League isn't around. And so he's meeting up with different characters and different members of the Justice League and talking to them. And there's a really neat interchange between him and Hal. And Hal expresses surprise that he and Carol didn't get together before Ollie and Black Canary got together, Ollie and Dinah got together, and that he kind of expresses some regret about not having a sidekick or a kid or anything like that. So I thought it was an interesting character piece. Did you get a chance to look at it at all?
I didn't, but I didn't look at that part of it because I knew we were doing this whole little new segment. So I was like, you know what? That's cool that he's doing his, and then of course, I could throw mine in because I
Yeah,
read other titles that you don't, right? So
right.
I do know that that is within Green Lantern context is the United Planets showed up are showing up in a lot of other books.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I saw I wanted man, what did I read? They were in that book with the challenges of the unknown, I think. Oh
Hmm.
God, what was that? Anyway, but I do know that they're showing up in other places.
That's
So,
interesting.
so I wonder if that's going to be the big. I don't know. I feel like there's going to be something big with that. It might have been Superman they showed up in. That could have been what it was. Anyway, so,
I
but it's a
kind of
cool
think they're
little new
gonna.
segment. Yeah,
Yeah, I think they're going to show up. I think we're heading on the collision course, obviously in the Green Lantern books,
I can't wait.
for
I'm waiting
sure.
for it. I'm waiting for a two-page throwdown with the United Planets, the Green
Yeah.
Lantern Corps, and everything thrown on that page. Bring it.
Yeah, I want to see some of the Green Lanterns who have kind of bent the knee to the United Planets, kind of turning around and switching sides, and
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to that. The other thing that happened is our old friend Robert Venditti is writing another volume of Superman 78, and this one's
terrific.
called Superman 78: The Metal Curtain. And you said you're reading it. I haven't. I'm
Mhm.
waiting to buy it in trade, but I've been flipping through it when I go to the comic shop, and it looks like Hal, now not Hal by name, but a pilot with the name call sign Highball shows up in the couple in issues what 2 and 3 so
Right.
far.
Two. It's some of two, and then at the beginning of three.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he and there's some interaction between him and Superman, which is neat. And it's a pre-Green Lantern Hal.
Right.
But
Right. We're talking
yeah,
1978, Christopher Reeve. Well, actually, it wouldn't be
yeah.
78. You'd probably count this as a continuation after. Oh, where did he begin that number? The first volume. Was it after the Superman 2?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure where this takes place. I mean, they're still calling it Superman 78, but
It could be. So you're out of the original Superman film. So
yeah,
it's really cool. It's really unique. I love what V's doing with that. It's just
yeah,
unique. It's a unique book, and I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
it's cool. It's
Yeah.
cool. So this episode is sponsored again by Manly Bands. Just to remind everybody, if you're interested in picking up a DC Comics Manly Band, it doesn't have to be the Green Lantern one. You can get 30% off by using the code Book of OA at checkout. So take advantage of it. It's a good opportunity if you've got some after Christmas money.
I gotta
Uh,
say, I have two of them now, and I wear them both. So I wear the Green Lantern one over here, and then I got my wedding ring replacement.
yeah,
I love it.
you replaced your wedding band with because your wedding
Yeah.
band broke and you picked up a Manly band for a wedding band, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's called the Journeyman. It's really a really a nice ring. Actually, Clark and my wife picked it out, so it's been named as my lantern ring. Clark
Um,
and my wife picked it out, and I love it. I love it. It's
great,
comfortable.
great company. I can't say enough good things about them. So, if you're interested, take advantage of the discount code while we've got it. And thanks again to them for giving us a discount code. We don't, and just to be clear, we don't get anything by you using the code. It isn't like we're getting some kind of a
No,
commission or any of that stuff. That was part of the conversation we had with them that we were more than willing to review the rings and talk about them on the show. But we wanted to be able to offer our listeners some kind of a discount to make it worth their while to jump in. And great, like we said, great product. So I'm happy to have them as a sponsor of the show, at least here for the next month or so, and hopefully people take advantage of the offer while it's there. Uh,
I do want to say that blah, the Bruce Wayne ring. You guys got to check that out. It's a little pricey, but I don't think Bruce Wayne's worth it, and I don't think Batman's worth it.
Black diamonds. I mean,
That's my plug.
Well, this episode, we've been pretty much dedicated and focused to the Silver Age and forward mythology of Green Lantern. But we thought with the fact that there's an Alan Scott series out there that maybe we should talk about it. And some people have asked about whether we're going to. So we thought, well, let's do that. So this episode, we're going to talk about the first 3 issues of Alan Scott, the Green Lantern. And then we've got a bunch of listener feedback because we've been holding it for a couple episodes. So we're going to go over some listener feedback. So I'm really excited. I hope everybody out there had a good holiday, and I hope you're ready to strap yourself in for 2024 and some good Green Lantern comics. And we're going to start talking about Alan Scott here in just a moment. Manly Bands is offering a very generous discount to our audience by giving us a discount code for 30% off of any of their DC Comics licensed rings. Simply enter the discount code BOOKOFOA, all in one word, to take advantage of this great opportunity. The code is good until January 15th, 2024. A big thank you to the staff at Manly Bands for providing us with rings to review and for giving our audience a terrific discount on your products. Visit their website at www.manlybands.com to check out all of the great rings they have to offer. All right, Green Lantern fans, we're back. We're going to be talking about issues 1 through 3 of Alan Scott, the Green Lantern. And before we get into it too far, just recently DC reprinted All American Comics number 16, which is, of course, the original debut of Alan Scott. And I thought it was worthwhile. I picked it up because it's a piece of history, and why not, right? And it was interesting. I wanted to read this before I read the Alan Scott series because I wanted to find out for myself how much does Tim Sheridan fit things in? I mean, does he change the origin of Alan Scott, or does he add new layers and nuances to it, but still makes the original story still work? So I thought that was interesting. In the original story, all that really happens is Alan Scott gets on the train, he gets the lamp, an accident's caused by Decker. Jimmy is on the train, and there's no connection between Alan and Jimmy that's implied. And that's this initial one. Now, in the 2005 Green Lantern 80th anniversary, it wasn't 2005, it was 2020, wasn't it? Yeah, it was 2020. Excuse me. There's a retelling of the origin again, and this time by James Tynion. And it's pretty much the same, but the added layer is they imply that Alan and Jimmy were more than friends.
Gotcha.
So that leads into this story. Now, there was also during the Pride book, there was a story this year, an Alan Scott story there that kind of ties into it. And of course, a lot of this gets thrown up in the air because of the whole Doomsday Clock story, because then Doomsday Clock, Dr. Manhattan prevents Alan from surviving in the train wreck, and then he goes back and restores it. So everything is kind of up in the air, really, as to what sticks and what doesn't stick out of this 2020 retelling.
Well,
So,
is it also worth mentioning at this point too, and with the fact that Alan Scott's origin out of Earth 2, originated from the fact from his, I guess, lack of a better words, his sexuality.
sure. I mean, the whole Alan Scott being gay thing goes back to Earth 2.
Right.
And I think there's been a lot of talk about this book that we're going to discuss. There's been a lot of talk about the fact that some people are fine with it no matter what. Some people are not as fine with it because they feel like, well, the Earth 2 Alan Scott, it's fine because it's a different version of the character. But this is the original version, and now you're changing that character. So there's some of that stuff too. And
that's a continuity thing.
yeah,
That's a whole messed up continuity thing. I mean,
sure.
You can argue semantics about that, but I don't know. I get it though. Fans
Sure.
are fans, right?
I get it. Well, right. I mean, it's one thing to think of another version of a character, but now they're altering the original version, and do some things still line up for that character that lined up before. And I get it, because as somebody who had a problem with what they did with Hal, they changed the character in a way in making him go bad, and the whole Emerald Twilight thing. You have to be sensitive to it. But the Golden Age characters, is there as much of a fan base for those characters? Is there as much uproar over it? I don't think so, but I don't think either opinion is wrong. I mean, you like what you like, and people don't like things being tampered with, and some people are completely fine as long as it's a good story. And I don't have a judgment either way on it, because neither opinion is wrong. It's an opinion, right? So that leads us into the first issue of this story, and in this, Tim Sheridan kind of fleshes the origin out a little bit. Things I think still line up, just there's another layer to it. At least that's the way I read it. Is that how you read it?
Yeah, it's the same way. I mean, it just seems like it to me. The three issues in, I feel, because the third issue is when the train wreck happens.
Right. So the
Right.
first two issues are all build up to that.
Right. So I feel like this one has the undercurrent of the government pull with Hoover. I think that's Hoover.
Yeah, it's J. Edgar Hoover.
Yeah, I think that throwing that level in there, it kind of opens up that whole paradigm of treatment of homosexuality during that time frame,
Sure.
which I think is a really, really good topic to broach. I mean, a lot can be taken away from that, especially your personal take on it and what we see it as in modern times. The thing of it is everybody likes to blame the past for what it's done, and it's like, man, you can't blame the past for what it's done. You can blame yourselves because we all came from it.
Right.
But at the same
Right.
time, yeah, I feel like these three issues of this book was a big long lead up, and which is cool because where is this going? 6 issues?
Yeah, it's 6 issues. Yep.
Yeah. So I kind of wish it wasn't just going 6 issues though. I kind of wish they were gonna stretch this out. I feel like Alan Scott has legs, and I don't feel like his character should be relegated to six. I mean, I think a hard 12 would be great for a book like this. I mean,
I'm
the
not reading
artwork's
the
fantastic.
other Golden Age stories. Are they 6 issues as well? I'm not sure.
I'm reading Jeff Johns. Is it Jeff Johns do JSA?
Yeah, but that's an ongoing. But I know they've done like
That's
there's a Doctor Midnight. No, not Doctor Midnight. There's a Sandman book and
I
a
don't
Jay
read that
Garrick book,
one.
and I think they're all 6 issues. So I think that's why
Okay.
it's six. And I think to get to the point, I think the reason why I wanted to wait until we got a little further along in the series was in the beginning. Alan was you were seeing some Green Lantern stuff kinda because it's jumping around in time, but we hadn't gotten to the origin yet. And I
Hmm.
really wanted to get to that point before I really started talking about the book because I wanted to be able to examine it through the lens of does does it invalidate anything that's in this book? And I don't think it does. I mean, it adds some things, and maybe there's a little bit of a tweak here and there. But to start it out, this issue, as you aptly put, it starts out with J. Edgar Hoover in the FBI and them kind of blackmailing Alan Scott to be really an active participant in JSA. And at this point, we have to remember Alan Scott, this is early in his adventuring life of Green Lantern. He may not be the same Green Lantern and the same character we know of because it's early in his career. People just like you and I, we change and evolve as we grow. So this is a snapshot of where he is at that point in time. And they're portraying Sheridan is portraying Alan Scott as someone who's a little aloof. He's not letting anybody get close to him. And we
Hmm.
find out as the story unfolds why he's that way. And he
Right.
really didn't want to be a part of the JSA necessarily. And Hoover blackmails him. And there was some talk online about this being a little cringy. And yeah, it was a little cringy, but if you look
It's
at the history,
post-war politics.
yeah,
It's going to be cringy. But
yeah,
sure, I mean, I don't think it should be taken as cringy. I think it should be taken as that's the harsh truth of what happened during those times. I mean, the
exactly.
1950s were terrible. Look up what they did in the
Yeah.
comic books during the
Sure.
1950s.
Well, and Hoover was known for having
Yeah.
a collection of images of celebrities that
Hmm.
he was using to, in case they needed to call somebody in to get some leverage on people.
Yeah.
That was kind of the way it worked. And yeah, it is cringy looking at it through today's lens, but back then that was the norm.
That's
And,
and that's a good hook that Sheridan put in there, and
yeah.
that's in the thing of it is that's a good play on he knows his timeline. That's a good play on that to hook
Mhm.
readers into that kind of concept, right? I mean, because like you said, I mean, your first thing is say it's cringy. Well, yeah, sure it's cringy. Imagine if you were that person.
Yeah.
My best friend, my best man is gay. And I always visualize a terrible situation that him and his husband could be in. And I always imagine, what could happen. But
Right.
and
And
Sheridan pulls that out really good
yeah.
with the emotional tack. It's great.
In this case, Hoover's using the fact that Alan is a closeted homosexual
Right.
because of the time frame. If he didn't have that, it would be something else. I mean, Hoover didn't just that wasn't his only thing. And there were there've been some rumors about Hoover's own sexuality.
Hmm.
But he would have used anything for leverage he could get. And he really needs the JSA to succeed for whatever reason. That's never really been revealed, at least as far as I know in this book. I didn't see anything talking about why it's such a big deal for him. I'm assuming it's okay, we're post World War II. We need some heroes to show American superiority or what have you. But at any rate, that's the situation. And then we get flashbacks to 1936. And at this point in time, Alan is really he's struggling with his sexuality and how does he work within the confines of the world around him where it's not accepted, he himself is questioning it and thinking, well, this is a sin or this is bad. Um,
And see that, and this is what makes it ultimately sad, right? I mean, because you're talking a long time ago, right? Alan Scott's navigating his own feelings with homosexuality and how he has to deal with that and the world. And what's really, really, for lack of a better words, crappy about that is there's a lot of people out there that still feel the same way, and it shouldn't be that way. And my God, that was decades ago.
mhm.
Come on, grow up already. Jesus.
In this situation, Alan is in a very secretive relationship with Johnny Ladd. And I thought it was kind of neat. At one point, Alan changes his last name to Alan
Lad.
Ladd Scott.
Yeah,
And originally, Alan Scott's name was going to be Alan Ladd, but they were concerned because there was an Alan Ladd comic book and Alan Ladd, it was an actor, and they were concerned about copyright and things like that. So they didn't go with Alan Ladd as his name. Ladd became his middle name. So I thought that was kind of a neat
very
little
cool.
way to tie that in. And I think Sheridan did a good job of researching how the Army Corps of Engineers works. At one point when they're on the, they've built the ship to kind of to go after the Crimson Flame, and they have this little chant. They say "Essayons." Well, "Essayons" is it was the official motto of the Army Corps of Engineers.
Yeah.
So I thought it was neat that there's that. Trying to tie it to reality, which I liked.
Now, what did you think of our Red Lantern visitor? Or,
I have to be honest, I'm not thrilled with the whole concept of having a Golden Age Red Lantern.
I
Uh,
think it predates Atrocitus. Well,
yes.
okay, you could say it predates Atrocitus, but I mean, Atrocitus, you don't know. Well, yeah, his origin was told well after this.
Sure, but we don't know in the timeline. The timeline has to be different in that
Right,
Atrocitus has got to be really old because
right.
Atrocitus was on Yzmal, and he was also part of the group that was captured with the five inversions, and that goes back a long time ago.
Hmm.
But the whole idea of having, it's hard enough for some people to parse the idea of there being these two different versions of a Green Lantern character, and now you're going to throw in a Red Lantern on top of it. It's a little. I'm not
Well,
thrilled with it, but
who would you? I mean, who would you have as a place mark for a villain then?
I don't know.
Alan Scott needs a villain,
Yeah,
right?
he,
I
he
mean,
needs a villain. I don't know if I'd have gone with it. But what I think Sheridan is doing is the red flame, the crimson flame, is somehow connected to the Starheart.
you think so?
Yes, I'm pretty sure that they're connected in some fashion. It hasn't that been revealed yet. I think that's what we're going to get to, is almost that it's two sides of the same coin.
Gotcha.
So I get it. And the Crimson Flame and the Red Lantern, it's a play on. It's not the emotional spectrum. It's red because of the Crimson Flame, and it's red because he's Russian.
It's communist.
Yeah,
He looks cool.
yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
you didn't. That's not a
I
very convincing. Yeah,
I think in my head, I would much rather the Golden Age characters be on Earth 2 again than trying to fit them into a timeline. But that's personal opinion. Yeah.
well, actually, I don't even think they're trying to fit them in a timeline. I think they're trying to tell two timelines at once. You got your
Well,
golden age forward, and then you got your modern stuff, which is happening now.
right. But I think I would have a
That's a
better
s-
time thinking of him being on a different Earth in the multiverse than trying to fit Golden Age heroes into the same timeline as the modern versions. But again, it's personal opinion, personal
that
preference.
that Earth 2 book was one of my favorite books. I
Yeah.
love that book. I absolutely loved it.
I always liked the pre-crisis version of the DCU when you had Earth 2 and the Justice League and the Justice Society would get together for team ups and things like that.
Yeah.
I prefer that over the World War II era stuff, but personal preference. Uh, but the first issue is a lot of setup, and one of the reasons again why I wanted to talk about this when we got more than one issue was, for me, the first issue was so heavy on the Alan Scott stuff and the character romantic parts and not enough of the adventuring thing.
Hmm.
And that doesn't, it's not any kind of it isn't because it's homosexual. That has nothing to do with it. If it was Hal and 75% of the book was talking about Hal and his love life, I'd be saying the same thing.
I would too. I
Like,
mean,
because that's not why I read comics.
yeah, I mean, everybody likes characterization and relationships, and you can always have those as a byproduct of your book. But I think your strong hook should be your number one, your central character, and number two, your where your story is and where it's going.
Yes.
And you can saturate it really, really hard when you start throwing other dynamics at it. And you got to be careful when you do because you got to also think about other oh, we got to factor in villains we're throwing at him. We got to factor in this we're throwing at him. And then all
Yeah.
of a sudden you start accumulating all this stuff. And sure, that's character building, but at the same time, you got to chip away at other things to get the central focus of where your book needs
Yeah.
to go.
I felt the first issue, just the balance was way out of whack for my own personal preferences. For what I would buy a comic for. If I was buying this, I'm not buying this in the as floppies. I'm going to buy it as a trade because I think it's going to read better as a trade anyway. But I didn't feel if it was a singular issue, it was hard for it to stand on its own because there wasn't enough going on. But I also understand that Alan does not have a lot of character. And I don't mean that detrimentally about the character, but I mean,
Just for lack of people not writing them. I mean, it just
right,
hasn't been written a
exactly.
lot, right?
And there's not enough development there. So Sheridan's got to build, he's got to get us to understand who Alan is, right? To be able to rally behind him.
But the depth,
And
yeah.
and as this unfolds, we find out that Alan is a pretty tragic character in some ways because every time he gets close to someone, every time he gets close to accepting who he is, bad things happen and somebody dies.
Yeah.
And that underscores a little bit about the tragedy of the character. I think it does some things to the character I'm not sure I like or agree with yet, but we're only 3 issues in. When we get to second issue, Alan goes to Arkham Asylum, and that's where we see the Alan Ladd Scott reference, which I thought was neat. The the lantern coming from Billy in that issue, it kind of contradicts a little bit of the original story, but not so much that it's a problem to me.
No, I mean it's just well, I mean think about it like this. I mean, it's not all that different of a telling of an origin story, except this one has a lot more caveats to it, I mean,
Yeah,
but I always accumulate that with well, one or two things. I mean, you're think about the writers of the time, and think about the writers of our time. I mean, they're great writers for their time for a reason, and
yeah,
that's usually how it stands out. So, you know, when the original storyline was written, it was simplistic in nature because your target audience was, more than a lack of better words, a juvenile population.
right.
Well, fast forward to 2020s, I mean, you can even go earlier than that, but my point is that your target audience has grown. It's a lot larger now. So people expect a little bit more of a depth when it comes to different storytelling and maybe some kind of, accumulation of how a character or where his origin comes from.
And I I think that the Crimson Flame incident, the Crimson Flame and the light of the lantern, that's why I think they're connected, is I think that it sought Alan out due to the Crimson Flame incident. And that's how it ends up coming back to him. Because otherwise it just seems so hard, I don't want to say hard to accept, but it's hard for me to believe that Alan, who had this interaction with the Crimson Flame, just so happens to get a lantern that gives him powers, and it's all not connected in some way. I feel like
Right.
it has to be connected. So I almost feel like whatever intelligence is behind this, and I'm assuming there's intelligence behind it, sought out a way to get to Alan. And that's how I am looking at it. And to me, the Crimson Flame is, as we've seen here, brings death and then it brings life and resurrection. And this whole thing is a little bit new. And how the Crimson Flame connects to the Star Heart, if the Star Heart is still part of the picture, is yet to be seen. And are they one and the same? I kind of think they are, but somehow they get split apart. But it's all conjecture at this point.
Sure. So, well, I misquoted because a train wreck happened in this issue too, not
Yes,
not the
yeah,
third one,
you're right.
right? So, what did you think about Corrigan.
So that's
His
issue
appearance.
3. That's
Issue
issue
three.
3. Yep.
Yeah.
Um, I I like the Spectre.
Right.
I thought he was a little out of character. Um,
I felt like he was I feel like, for lack of a better words, he was really, really sympathetic with Alan.
right. He was more sympathetic than he normally is.
Yeah, like, yeah.
And I felt it was a little heavy-handed to have him hug Alan.
I didn't see that. Like, I never
Yeah,
seen the Spectre hug anybody before.
exactly.
I mean, look
Exactly.
back at any issue. I don't think I've ever, if any, somebody can send it to me, and I've read a lot of Spectre stuff, even the Howl stuff, but like, I don't recall him ever hugging anybody. But, hey, this is, whatever. To each their own, right? Spectre's hugging
Yeah.
people now.
I just felt like, for people who have a problem, there's a subtext that's going through culture of let's just use the phrase forced agendas, right?
Right.
There's that whole topic. And so for some people looking at the scene, I can see how they could look at it and say, okay, Sheridan is trying to use the Spectre as a way to show that God approves of the lifestyle. Okay. And so he's making the Spectre do something that's out of character for him to send that message. Is that what he's doing? I don't know. I felt it was a little, it's more empathy than I've ever, like you said, it's more empathy than I've ever seen the Spectre show.
Well, and the thing about it is, when you ask a question like that, I mean, the only person that can answer that honestly is going to be the writer himself, right? And whether he
Right.
has implications behind what his methods are and what he produces.
Right.
And that's fun, and it's funny, like, we talk about that time and time again with different writers, and the incorporation of one's beliefs and one how they operate in the world is their own business. I don't care, right?
Right.
I don't care what people's beliefs are, because I'm in it for the writing. Now, I will say this. This is written really, really well, and Sheridan can write. I mean, he writes a really, really good dialogue on this. Um, that being said, I do know what you're saying, the context of what people see this book in.
Yeah.
And and that's fine. I mean, that maybe at the end of the day, I don't know. Some people see things differently than you and I do, though, and
Sure.
we talk about that constantly with
Yeah.
books.
Yep. Mhm.
There's people that still think that Batman's a great character, and I'll never understand why, you know. And there's also people that still like the Jeff Thorne run of Green Lantern, and we will never get to that. But
No, no.
at the end of the day, we all have our likes, and
Yep.
I I really am liking this. I don't think, again, I'll say it. I don't want it to end at 6 issues. I don't want to
Yeah.
see Alan Scott go away.
For me, I feel the series is still lopsided. I need
Sure.
to see more of the Green Lantern stuff, but I think we're going to get that in the second half. And so I'm kind of reserving my judgment until I get the whole story. I I almost feel like I wish this had been like a prestige 2 or 3 issue graphic novel than a monthly floppy, because I think this is they're trying to take a long form story and chop it up into 6 pieces.
And there's a lot of dialogue in these 3 issues too,
Yeah,
man. I
yeah,
mean, the guy writes a lot. So, like, this would even be good in a collected 6 issue,
yes, yep,
trade. And I think it might read better that way, because
yeah,
sometimes I get fragmented when and people that know comic books, you read so many comic books, some things can bleed, and they run together. You
right.
forget what happens over here and over there. So, but I think this being collected would be beneficial to it,
Yeah, I
and it
think
will
so.
be at some point, I'm sure.
I'm thinking, so there's the lopsided part, but I've got a couple of pieces in the back of my head that I'm not sure how it's going to play out. And one of them is we know Alan is a young man in the 30s.
Hmm.
We know he comes out to Jade and Obsidian in our current timeline. How old is Alan Scott, and how is he able to be this young at that point in time? So there's that's unresolved, right? We have to figure that out, because the problem with setting things in a specific time is you now have the time differential to deal with. So there's that piece.
And you can't use Earth 2 as escape, right?
Exactly. So there's that piece of it. And then Alan is a bit of a himbo in these few issues. He's connecting with a lot of people, and you get the impression that, and I understand in this time frame, it was hard to have a relationship, and so there were a lot of casual encounters. I'll use that as my phrase. But part of me is like, I'm. You see Alan questioning his sexuality, and he's not at peace with it in this.
Mhm.
He's questioning himself. He doesn't know where he fits in. He doesn't know if he's being true to himself or, I mean, he honestly, he checks himself into Arkham Asylum because he thinks he can be cured.
Right, and he even
Uh,
goes through conversion therapy, which,
right.
by the way, is terrible.
So part of me's having a little bit of an issue trying to parse how Alan knows he's a homosexual at this point. Does he, at the end of the story, does he go back in the closet? And that's how he's able to get married twice? Be- I don't know. And I'm struggling a little bit with the integrity of Alan as we know him, being somebody who knows he's gay, but yet getting married and to two women and having kids. And I know people did that at the time back in the day. They did that to protect themselves.
Hmm.
But I don't know how I can parse it in my head knowing because I think of Alan as this noble character. I almost put him on a pedestal to the point at which I don't think of him as a flawed human. So I've got to come to terms with how that plays out in my head. But
Sure.
I'm more concerned about how he is so spry in the 21st century, knowing that he was in the military as a young man and during World War II. I know we can accept we can suspend our disbelief over a lot of things,
Well, there's one
but
key. Wouldn't that be the Starheart then?
possibly,
I mean, if that's your, I mean, that would kept them young or
maybe,
ish
maybe.
or young at, well, I don't know,
Because
whatever
we saw it do
age.
that in regular continuity, right? We saw during the Kyle Rayner era, he was rejuvenated and became Sentinel there for a
Yeah,
while.
that's
Uh,
right. That's
so
right.
there's that possibility. So I'm kind of trying to parse it is okay. We don't know exactly what happens because we've had not enough continuity resets that who knows what it's going to be.
At the end of the day, that's one thing that comic books or nothing can ever solve is the age of any comic book person, right?
Right.
You could throw out whatever you, oh, he's alien. No, that's fine. That's easy. You know, I mean, how old is Batman now? The dude should be dead. I'm sorry.
Right. And they like to everybody likes to talk about the compressed timeline. The problem is when you tie fictional events to real things in a real timeline, it makes it harder
Hmm.
to process. Like I always had a problem. Some Marvel fans would say, well, Marvel doesn't have the problem that DC has with their continuity. And I'm like, I have an issue of Marvel team up where Spider-Man teams up with the not ready for primetime players on Saturday Night Live. So if he did that, how can he be young still at this point in time? So all the universes have that problem because you're trying to be timely and cash in on popularity of other things, and now you've attached yourself to a specific time frame. And how do you, I mean, Hal has the same problem. You had in New Frontier, Hal was tied to the Korean War, and then he was tied to being a test pilot, and then he
Yeah,
was
that's
up
true.
in the military. So it all everybody has that problem. And I guess we as readers just have to kind of accept it and move on. But when you're trying to take it seriously,
I know, right? I have continuity issues.
it's like you kind of turn a blind eye to certain things.
I mean, I don't know. A lot of people argue the continuity thing, and I mean, that's such a tough draw.
It
Like, I mean,
is.
how do you sit here like because again, it all comes down to what somebody likes and what somebody doesn't like. But like,
Yeah.
I mean, do I like things tied together? Sure. Do I like things put in a neat, pretty box? Yeah, but that ain't gonna happen in comic books. I mean,
No,
geez, I
it
mean, it's like
it's
somebody
not.
took a bit. It's like somebody took a box of confetti and threw it everywhere. Figuring out where it's going to land or where it's going to lay is going to take forever because that stuff takes forever to settle.
It,
It's
it's
God.
it's problematic when you're talking about serialized fiction that goes on forever,
Yeah.
because how does it go on forever? I mean, how long has Charlie Brown been a kid?
Yeah.
But
Dude's
the
not
thing
grown
is,
up.
it's not tied to any particular event, at least as far as I know. I'm not up on my Peanuts continuity, but it's not tied to a specific event. So you can say this all encapsulates their childhood because There's nothing showing where they've gotten older or a reason for them to get older. So it fits. But when you have comics where you've tied it to real life events, it makes it harder. That time is very elastic for these
Yeah.
characters.
And not only that, what makes it hard too is when you have characters that are a representation of the time they came out of. So Dick Tracy, right? He will
Right, right,
always be known for that mob era. Well, can you tell another story of Dick Tracy without the mob being involved at all?
right,
You
right,
can't.
right.
It's hard. It would be so hard to be done.
Isn't
It's the
there a
same
Dick
thing with
Tracy book? Isn't there a Dick Tracy book coming out this year?
yeah,
Yeah,
what's his face is writing it.
yeah.
Oh God. Is it not Adams?
I
Maybe it
don't.
is Jeremy.
It
No,
might be.
Jeremy
I,
Adams is doing Flash Gordon, I
that's
think.
right. He's doing Flash Gordon. But yeah, I mean, Dick Tracy with the watch that is like a phone.
Yeah, I
I mean,
mean,
he had a cell phone before it was a phone. It's a smartwatch. He was ahead of his time.
think about it like this. It's the same problem that the people over at James Bond 007 are going to have right now moving forward with whoever they choose to be 007.
Yeah.
They got a big problem with that. I mean, because you got a guy who's been so driven over machismo and sexism over the course of how many decades? Nobody likes that crap anymore. So how do you reinvent that when that's what the character was known for?
Right.
Yeah, a
James
tough
Bond was of a
sell.
time, right? He was of a time.
Of the times, tough sell for people these days. What bothers me is when people can't let go of the past stuff. It's like, well, that shouldn't have happened. Well, that was the past. Well, that shouldn't
Yep.
be like, well, that's the past. I mean,
Well, and if it's done as a period piece, you can kind of accept it because it's of the time.
yeah, but you can't blame the past.
No,
I'm sick of people
no.
blaming the past. You can't blame the past on that shit. I mean, we've all been through it, so whatever.
Yeah.
I
But
have continuity issues.
um so 3 issues in, I'm still on the fence about the book. I think I need to see all 6 issues before I can pass judgment as to what I think about it. Right now, again, I feel like it's lopsided in terms of what I like to read, but I also understand why it's lopsided.
I love it. I love the art. I wish it was going to be longer than 6. I've said that like 10 times now. Um, but again, I like Alan Scott no matter what, and he deserves to have books, and I think he deserves to be written more. I think he deserves to be in more. I'd like to see some kind of tie-in with him and Green Lantern Corps at some point. A hard tie-in. I'm not talking some soft, piddly stuff where he just appears. No, I'd like to see a hard tie-in at some point. I think it'd be cool. And it doesn't even have to be. It could be on Earth too. I don't care. I have continuity issues.
All right, everybody. Well, we'll be back in a couple minutes. We've got a bunch of listener feedback, and so we'll be back and go over your comments.
This is Giancarlo Volpe, producer of Green Lantern, the animated series, and you're listening to the podcast of OA.
Our first message is from the Green Lanterns podcast, transmitting in 3, 2, 1.
Love listening to you guys.
All right, everybody, welcome back. And our first piece of feedback is from Green Lanterns podcast. Thank you, guys. We appreciate it. And we're going to put a post to their podcast as well. They've got some videos out on YouTube as well. And hey, if you haven't checked them out yet, please give them a listen.
Yeah,
So,
and their blog's pretty good. I've scrolled through it a couple times. It's pretty
Yeah.
good stuff.
Yep. So, Powering, why don't you go ahead and give us the next message?
Our next message is from Clone Avenger. He has some comments about Green Lantern issue 5, James Gunn, and the Todd McFarlane action figures. Transmitting in 3, 2, 1.
Green Lantern issue 5 was excellent. Jeremy Adams continues to deliver with this series. I loved seeing Sinestro tapping into rage on the emotional spectrum at the end of the issue. Cannot wait to read the next installment. The art continues to deliver as well. I would love to see Razor introduced in these comics at some point. We need to see what becomes of his search for Aya. As a huge fan of the animated series, that would make me happy. I want to say, I also understand Phil's skepticism for James Gunn's DC universe, but I am quite a fan of his work, and so far the Superman Legacy casting seems to be spot on, at least for me. I want to also add that I hope we get a Blackest Night figure line from McFarlane. I would love to have a Larfleeze and Saint Walker figure. Thanks for all you guys do.
Clone Avenger. Well, we finally got to your feedback. Sorry, this predates this, but you did mention Razor appearing, and I think we all know Razor appeared. So spot on. Green Lantern issue 5, excellent. So you talked about my skepticism with Gunn's DC universe. I proof is in the proof is where it lays. Show me what you got and put it out there. And if it's a product that I'm willing to buy into, I'm all for it. I'm just tired of people messing with it. I'm tired of people messing with DC stuff. I'm over it. And this is going back way too long, and too many hands have been doing this and doing that, doing this. I'm just, give me something streamlined and something good. I'm game.
Yeah. And Blackest Night figure line from McFarlane, sign me up. We've
Damn.
seen some things. I love the Necron figure, and I thought the
Mhm.
Atrocitus was really cool. I'd love to see a Larfleeze and a St. Walker as well. I think that would be really awesome.
I'll
I'd
take
also like to see Indigo Tribe.
I'll take Brother Wars.
Oh yeah. I mean, we got one, but I'd like to see what McFarlane would do with Brother
McFarlane.
Worth.
Yeah.
I think the only thing I haven't liked about the McFarlane figures for the most part have been the facial sculpts on human characters, but the aliens and stuff look really good. Anytime he's in monsters and things like that. So I would totally get into some of that stuff. That would be really cool to see.
Yeah.
There was a whole line of Blackest Night figures, and they were great, but I'd like to see what McFarlane would do with them too. I think that would be really awesome. Power Ring, why don't you go ahead and give us the next one?
There are two messages from Warlion. The first is about the Alan Scott Green Lantern series. Transmitting in 3, 2, 1.
The problem with the JSA isn't related to which Earth they are on, but the fact that they're a product of another time that in our hypersensitive world is seen as problematic. Even if we had them on Earth too as people from the 40s, the problem will still stand. The 90s JSA by Robinson and Johns showed that with how they've successfully trained new generation of heroes like Stargirl and Kyle, but failed to connect with them socially because they're still living with their 40s beliefs. The current era doesn't allow for an Alan Scott who took a long time to accept that his son is gay to exist because sensitive people take it as homophobia, and a hero can't be homophobic, or he can't be unless he's secretly gay and so can be oppressing his son. Writers can't accept a character from different time who accepted his son later to be a hero but can accept a selfish person to be one. What a broken view of superheroes. He also can't have established a team with America's name in it because he's patriotic, but he has to be forced by the conservatives' villains to do so. It's not just with the JSA. Oliver Queen's rivalries with Hal, Barry and Hawkman are not a thing anymore. That's my opinion regarding the problem, and let me be clear, I'm not American, so I don't really have opinions about American politics or anything like that. I'm just approaching this from the POV of someone who read a lot of comics and have seen the world's political changes affect media. Sorry about the long messages I usually send. I just love ranting about comics. Hopefully that's not bothering you. Edit. I don't mean to condone homophobia, but I mean that the Alan Obsidian story was a good one, as Alan had to come to terms with that the things he perceived as bad are actually not, and it's a great story of Obsidian as it actually details struggles of gay people without being trope wire shallow.
Hey, Warlion, thanks for reaching out. We've got a couple messages from you in this episode, and so we will tackle them one at a time. And yeah, you're right. The problem with some of the storytelling is we kind of alluded to earlier is it's hard sometimes. People don't accept things through a modern lens when they're looking at the past, when those things were normal back then. And when you're trying to tell a period story, it is difficult because you want to be authentic to the time period. But then you also have to be willing to allow things that maybe might not be allowable now. We were talking about James Bond earlier. James Bond, there was what would be perceived today would be called misogynistic.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you tell a Cold War story about a character like James Bond if you don't include those elements? Then are you really talking about James Bond? Are you changing the character or diluting the character to make him palatable for modern audiences? And that's a real challenge.
That's
and you
hard.
see it across the board. You see it with everything. I mean, look at how we're seeing, and I don't want to go down the whole road of analyzing the world today, but look at how we have people looking at historical figures in a very negative light because of the actions of the time period in which those actions today are not acceptable, but back in their time it was acceptable. And are you going too far in criticizing them for what they did back then when that was the norm? It's a really fine line, and it's very hit or miss. And I get your point about Alan Scott originally had a hard time accepting Obsidian's sexuality, and that would be a hard story to write today because, again, as you say, they'd be labeled as homophobic. And how does this news story work? I mean, does Alan Scott's news story take the place of that story? I don't know. I mean, obviously those
Mhm.
back issues exist, so you can go back and read them anytime you want. But if we're telling a modern storyline, how does it work out? I mean, we saw the story where he came out to Jade and Obsidian and such, and it seemed like a different dynamic. And does it all fit? I don't know. I mean, the DC's rule these days seems to be that it all happened.
I have one thing to say.
Continuity
I
issues.
I have continuity issues. Gosh. I mean, it is mind-boggling, and I get what Warlion's saying, there's a lot in it, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to say about it. It's one person's take on, I don't know. It'd be like if I was to take it, it'd say like if I was like, what, 20 years ago wrote Green Lantern, and then 20 years later, would I write him a different way? I don't, probably, because I'm living in a different time and I've
Right.
been impacted by many different things in
Right. You've got different life
decades,
experiences that are going to impact how you approach a story.
and a good, I mean, and a good fine line to draw on that is unfortunately post-war politics. I mean, it's an easy target because there was a lot going on. I mean, you had the Japanese that were getting, oppressed. Not to mention, you still had the racism issues that were still embroiled in this nation that never go away. And then, and you had a conglomeration of other things. Not to mention the fact of what Myron and I talked about with the Alan Scott book and the heated Hoover in the FBI at the time, and how they targeted people. There was a lot going on. So that's an easy piece of American history to extrapolate upon.
Sure.
So
All right. Powering. I know Warland's got another message, so why don't you let us hear that one?
Warlion's second message is about the nature of the Starheart as it was mentioned in the Green Lantern 80th Anniversary Special. Transmitting in 3, 2, 1.
I've reread the GL 80th Anniversary Special recently and it has me intrigued about something. The secret files mention that Alan Scott's Starheart is a failed early attempt at creating a GL ring and that this retcon isn't a new one in the files but took place in a previous comic. When did that retcon take place? I also find that retcon interesting because of the latest Green Lantern solicitations and the hints at magic shenanigans taking place. Also, doesn't that break the Red Lanterns as the first Red Lantern who successfully created a ring using magic is Atrocitus?
All right, Warlion. So I want to talk a little bit about the Starheart. So I went back and I pulled out the 80th anniversary issue, and you're partially right. It mentions that let me read it. Let me read it verbatim. Years later, it was revealed that Alan's power was derived from the Starheart, an early experiment by the Guardians of the Universe to wield the green light of willpower. Uh, Whoever wrote that is a little off. It wasn't a ring. So back in Green Lantern number 111, back during the Silver Bronze Age, there was a story where they were doing a story with Alan Scott interacting with the Silver Age, Bronze Age Green Lanterns. And in that issue, they had the Guardians reveal to Allie and Hal that back when you rewind the clock back through Guardian history, after they dealt with the five inversions, they kind of felt like their job was to use science and explore the willpower stuff and so on. And they used technologies and techniques they had. And I'm going to put the panel up on the screen for those watching on YouTube. But they gathered together all the mystic forces in the universe and created the Starheart. And so that's how they're trying to tie Alan Scott's story to the Green Lantern Corps, because the Starheart then a fragment of the Starheart in Volume 3, Issue 19. They tell the backstory of how Yalin Gur, who was a Green Lantern that the Guardians tried to punish, they gave him the vulnerability to wood, and his ashes burn up, his body burn up in the atmosphere, and combined with the meteorite to create the lantern that powers Alan Scott. So that's how it all ties together, at least back then. Now, how that fits into this new story, I'm not exactly sure. Maybe we'll find that out as things go on. but I don't think it undoes anything with Atrocitus and using magic because that goes back before the Red Lantern shows up in the 40s, because Atrocitus and all that stuff occurred in the whole five inversions thing. Atrocitus has to be thousands of years old, just that the Guardians are. So I don't think it really negates any of that. I don't know if I would consider it a retcon. And that's the only time I can find. Now, maybe if somebody out there knows where they showed the Starheart really being an attempt to create a ring and I'm missing something, let us know. But that's the only connection I'm aware of, was it was tied to them harnessing the mystical energies and making the Starheart. And it wasn't like it was something that they were playing around with to harness the willpower energy, but it was what they did so they could harness the willpower energies. They were like, we have to go either choose the science path or the magic path, and they chose the science path and took all the magical energies and confined it and buried it away so it wouldn't interfere.
Look at
So
you go, Starheart expert.
But yeah, no, I don't think it negates anything with Atrocitus because again, that goes back ends. But thanks for pointing it out. And if anybody has a different take on it, by all means share it with us because if I'm wrong, I'd like to know what the right answer is if my answer is incorrect. Power Ring, why don't you go ahead and give us the next bit of feedback?
The next message is from JP Roca. JP's comments are about the upcoming Sinister Sons and the growth of DC's cosmic books. Transmitting in 3, 2, 1.
With the upcoming Sinister Sons and Kneel Before Zod books, the cosmic DC will be explored more outside of Hal and John's books. These books will also bring more insight into the inner working of the United Planets. Zod gets his own planet, as we remember from the Jurgens run on the Rebirth Green Lanterns book. And during the Bendis Superman run, Zod was represented at the creation of the United Planets looking to join. I really like Zod's weaving in and out between the Superman and Green Lantern books. The Kneel Before Zod book coming in January picks up on that storyline, with Zod trying to establish and build his world. Zod, annoyed with his spoiled son Lord Zod, banishes him from the planet. We will pick up his story in the upcoming Sinister Sons book. This makes the unexpected team-up of Sinestro and Zod's sons make more sense, and I hope this connection also grounds their book more for Green Lantern fans.
JP Rocha. First, let me say, when you talk about Kneel Before Zod, man, when I heard that book was coming out, I was all over it. I was texting Myron like all the time. I can't wait for this. I can't wait for this. And the first issue dropped this week, and it was amazing. I love it. I mean, the variant covers for that book are phenomenal. I'm so involved in this book, and I love what you're talking about here with him and his connection to, because the United Planets show up in issue 1, just so people know. But you were talking about how Zod got his own planet from the Jurgens run, and he's on it in here. Actually, he's trying to restore Kandor. I think they're always trying to restore that stupid bottle city. They haven't figured out a way yet. We're in 2024. Oh, wait a minute. What year are we in? Oh, that's right. We have continuity issues. And I will double down on what you said. I like Zod's interaction with the lanterns because I loved when Venditti used them. I thought it was pretty unique. And I do like when he's in Superman. Now, he hasn't been in Superman in a while, but there's other focus going on there. So it's another book, another topic.
Yeah, I love seeing Zod interact with the Green Lanterns. That whole Venditti story, I loved that arc. That was really
Cool.
It was really a lot of fun. And I liked seeing Zod interact with somebody besides Superman. And I think the reason why we're not seeing a lot of Zod and Superman right now is that people there's still that connection back to Man of Steel and all that stuff. And so I think they're trying to like lean away from using Zod in the comics with Superman right now. But this book, I'm gonna have to pick up Kneel Before Zod because I like Zod as well, and I have not gotten to my comic shop since before the holidays. So I'm gonna have to pick that book up when I go because now you've sold me on it. So I gotta do
It's
it.
so good. I mean, it's like if they made a Black Hand book, I would be so into that. And then Cyborg Superman, fine, done. You nailed me. All 3 of those. I won't read Green Lantern anymore. No, I'm just kidding.
But I think as JP points out, the connection between the Green Lanterns and Zod makes this whole Zod's son and Sinestro's son coming together in some fashion make a lot of sense.
I mean, I don't know. I haven't read any of the backup stuff with the Sinestro or the whatever his son thing. What's that? The James Tinian stuff.
Yeah.
I can't. I don't know. I've tried it, but I just feel like it's a kid's book.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, but it's cool because it's a good target. Kids like villains. Come on, and you can have this kid that's got a, I don't know, for lack of a better word, hot temper. I don't know. To each their own.
I know. I think it'll be interesting. And I like how they're using the United Planets in that too. Because if I think one of the things that's been missing in DC books for a while is the sense of it's one universe, it's a cohesive universe, and we haven't seen a lot of the DC cosmic stuff interconnecting in any way. So I think seeing United Planets play out in various books makes a lot of sense, and to me, it helps bring back that connective tissue that's been
You
kind
know,
of lacking.
and it's funny how we talk about the United Planets now all the time. You ever notice that?
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden now it's the United Planets. Now they've been targeted as public enemy number one for whatever they're doing out there, because it hasn't been hasn't been revealed yet. We don't know why Earth's quarantined by them. But like United Planets is enemy number one now. I love it. The
Yeah.
throwdown needs to happen.
Yep, it does. It does in the worst way. All right, we've got one more message. Power Ring, why don't you go ahead and let us hear it?
Our last message is a voice recording from Lincoln. Lincoln's feedback concerns the Jon Stewart series Green Lantern Mosaic. Broadcasting his message in 3, 2, 1.
Myron and Phil, this is Lincoln in Milwaukee. I'm so glad that you're liking the new John series. I'm enjoying it also. Speaking of Jon Stewart, I'm curious what you thought of the Green Lantern Mosaic series when it came out in the 1990s, and how you think it compares to the Jon Stewart series now. When Mosaic came out in the 90s, it was the series that made me realize how strange and creative comics could be, and it's the reason I fell in love with the Green Lantern mythology. Sadly, as you know, that whole era of Green Lantern comics has been tarnished by the writer, but curious to hear your thoughts. Thanks for all you do, and happy holidays.
Hey, Lincoln, thanks for the voicemail. Really appreciate it. I love getting some different voices on the show and being able to, it makes my job a little easier when there's a voicemail file.
He
So,
also says he's from Milwaukee, and
yeah,
my best friend and his husband live in Milwaukee, and my brother lives in Green Bay. So there
awesome.
you go. Awesome.
And agreed, the Jon Stewart series right now, Green Lantern War Journal, is a great book. I'm enjoying it. As far as Green Lantern Mosaic goes, you're right. It was very much a trippy book. And, it's problematic in some ways right now because of the writer and the things that he has done. It makes it difficult, but it doesn't take away the story. And there really isn't anything in Green Lantern Mosaic, at least as far as I can remember, that's problematic itself.
I
I
haven't read it in a while, so
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't
it's been a
know.
while. It's been a while since I've read it either. My memory, 59-year-old brain doesn't remember what it used to. But I don't recall there being anything that would have been considered problematic at the time. But it was a trippy story. I liked it. Sometimes it was a little too trippy for me, but it was okay. How does it compare? I much prefer the Philip Kennedy Johnson story right now. I just think a stronger characterization.
Cleaner too.
Mosaic was
It
Mosaic
just
was
seems
good, but
yeah, it just seems like it's cleaner too, like
yeah,
the Johnson's version. He seems like he's cleaning up a lot of stuff with John Stewart at the same time while also grounding him a little bit more in his characterization.
yeah. I mean, Mosaic was good for John because it gave him a continual focus where he was the center of the book. We had time periods when, Hal would step aside and John would be the Green Lantern, and then Guy would be the main Green Lantern, but it never allowed John to really stand, or Guy for that matter, to really stand out on their own. And eventually Guy got his own book. And then with the whole Voldarian thing, which we won't get into, I never cared for that stuff. But he got his own book to do things with, and John really didn't get that opportunity other than Mosaic. And Mosaic was unfortunately a victim of the a relationship between Tom Dooley and the writer, the editor and the writer it didn't go right. Uh, not Tom Dooley, Kevin Dooley, excuse me. But their relationship soured, and Mosaic was another victim of what happened in the fallout from Emerald Twilight. So it's unfortunate in that regard. I think it would have been interesting to see where that story was going to go if he was going to do more with it. But it was good for John because he needed something. even though it wasn't a long-lasting book, it was good for the character because it gave you more than what we saw when he would show up in Green Lantern.
Mhm.
So, but I don't think it's as good as what we're getting now. And it's hard to say. We're only a few issues into Green Lantern War Journal, but War Journal, it feels more pure to me, at least.
Right.
But thanks again. And Power Ring, why don't you tell everybody how they can be a part of the show, and then we'll come back and we'll wrap things up.
You can become a part of the show by leaving a message up to 1 minute long on our voicemail line. Call us at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can also email us at podcast@blogofoa.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Fellow Owens, welcome back. Well, that was a cool episode, man. I had a good time talking about this stuff. I mean, it's sometimes tough topics are, I don't know. I mean, people don't like talking about uncomfortable things, and
Right.
no, I don't claim to be an expert on anything, so
No.
I
hope we navigated it correctly. Because I don't want anybody to be, to think we're not supportive. I mean, every book can be criticized in some way, shape, or form, and I don't have a problem with it. I think it's just the balance of the book that's a problem for me.
right.
But again, we'll see. These miniseries are always difficult because it's a not necessarily an open-ended story like you normally see, and it's sometimes I don't think these miniseries read well as individual issues.
I always call them flashpoints, I mean,
Yeah, that's good.
they hit really hard, and because for one or two things, popularity of a certain character maybe, and popularity of subject matter. I don't know for like you, but and these are flashpoints, so that's why I keep saying I need more than 6 issues. You can't. To me, even though you got 3 issues base here, and you're building up this storyline for Alan Scott, and if you're going to build that kind of base, to me, you can't do it in 6 issues. To
Yeah.
me, you need to tell a full story and get it out in 12.
Yep. And I just don't feel like in the monthly format, it's as effective of a way to present the story.
Yeah, also fair, especially Alan Scott. I mean, he deserves I think he deserves a different type of book, but I wouldn't say that this one should be forgotten about. No, I'm just saying
No.
that I think that he needs something longer. And so I hope whatever Sheridan does, I hope they continue on with this series. I'd like to see more of this, especially if there's a connection with the JSA in some way. So that's that.
All right. Well, friends, we'll be back in a week or two to talk about Green Lantern #7. And big thank you again to Manly Bands for sponsoring the show and giving us that promo code. So until next time, everybody, please take care. Take good care of yourselves and others around you, and keep that power ring charged, and make every day your brightest day. Thanks so much for watching this Green Lantern video from the blog of OA. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find even more great Green Lantern videos, reviews, podcasts, and more at our main website, www.blogofoa.com. So until next time, keep your power ring charged and make every day your brightest day.